and welcome to the Story Center Speak Your series. I'm Shannon Thompson, and I'm the Story Center Program Manager. I'm just here to welcome you to tonight's program. Tonight, we will be having a wonderful conversation with author Ann Patchett and Kate DiCamillo. We will be taking questions in the comments below towards the end of the program, so get ready for that. Other than that, I'll just go ahead and turn it over to the authors.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you, Shannon. Hi, Ann.
How are you?
I'm in charge of interviewing you.
I'm looking forward to that. How are things in Minnesota? How much snow do you have?
Ann, we're not here to talk about snow. You're not gonna like take me down the weather rabbit hole. Instead, you know what we're here to talk about?
What?
You. And,
okay.
And as I told you, I have decided that what we're going to talk about tonight is the ages of Anne, which I think is a great title.
I'm Southern, and every conversation with a Southerner begins with a polite question about the weather.
How's the weather in Tennessee, Ann?
Not until you tell me about the weather in Minnesota.
It was a beautiful day in Minnesota. It was above freezing. We still have snow on the ground, probably, I don't know, 4 inches or so, something like that. And the moon is coming up outside my window, and it's quite beautiful. It's still clear. Okay, now, Ann, continuing on the southern vein, you must tell me, how's Nashville?
It was a lovely day. Thank you for asking. You know, we had snow and ice for a solid week. We couldn't go anywhere, which is very unusual for us. And then the last 2 days have been gorgeous, and tomorrow is going to rain, and it is going to rain for 5 days.
Oh my goodness.
So
this is your last day of sun.
I was walking Sparky. I was walking his little paw pads off all day because it was lovely. See, this is, Kate, this is how people begin polite communication.
Okay, let's start with Ann Patchett as a child. Okay.
I'm ready now. I've gotten the other out of the way.
Because I want to talk about, and I would think that I'm not alone in rereading your essays, and this is a story of a happy marriage. And in there's a wonderful essay about your dad at Christmas and him reading you a story. Can you like encapsulate that and put it into context for us, Ann, about the kid that you were, where your dad was, where you were, how you went and saw him once a year, and all. Can you do that in 5 words or less?
I can, but I want to tell you a really funny related story first. Can I tell you a really?
Do I know it? Do I know it?
I don't think so.
Okay, great, good. Then no one else will know it.
So this book is a collection of essays called "This is the Story of a Happy Marriage," and it's you know, they're essays about commitment and love, but they're about all sorts of different things. Certainly not a book about marriage. So it comes out, and I was on the Morning Joe show because I'm friends with John Meacham, and I live in Nashville, and John got me this gig, and he was not there. And I sit down, I've never seen Morning Joe, but I sit down at the round table, and there are 4 guys, and they have copies of This is the Story of a Happy Marriage, and the camera goes on, and it's taped, and they open up the book, and one of the guys says, okay, now I'm really interested in this essay called How to Read a Christmas Story. Ann Patchett, can you tell us how reading Christmas stories to each other will help you have a happier marriage? On television, right?
Yeah, so what did you do? You're pretty good on your feet.
I'm pretty good. You know, honestly, I said something to the effect of, I'm pretty good on my feet. Like, do you not even have interns? They hadn't even opened the book before I sat down. And
I want to know what happened after that, Ann.
I said, we just can't do this. And they were like, yeah, you're right, we can't. And we all took our mics off, and I went home, and that was it.
Really?
Truly, there was no appearance on Morning Joe. That was the whole.
Wow. Oh, I thought you were engaged in
There's
an
my
hyperbole.
husband.
Oh, there goes Carl right now. Speaking of happy marriage, yeah.
Speaking of happy marriages, there he is.
There he is going down to the basement. Okay.
Now I will go back to the question that you asked, which is, so my.
And let's just keep this in mind, Ann. I have read that collection several times, so I've done my work. So I deserve my answer, unlike those people. Yeah.
It is not Morning Joe around here.
Yeah.
My parents got divorced when I was really young. We'll call it 4. I moved to Nashville just before I turned 6 with my mother and my sister. My mother married again. And my father would call us once a month and on holidays. My sister and I both had birthdays on the 2nd of the month. So he would call on the 2nd of the month. The 2 things that were incredibly expensive when I was a child, long distance phone calls and flying.
Yeah, I was going to say, and the flying too. Yeah.
Yeah, it really, really messed things up for us. But on Christmas, and I'm going to say that I was 9 or something like that. I mean, I don't know how old I was. I could have been 11. I don't know. But my father called on Christmas and he read me a Christmas story that had been published in the Los Angeles Times. And it was just a real moment of understanding on his part. It was such a beautiful gift, made me feel like he understood that I wanted to be a writer. And
even though he kept on telling you to be a dental hygienist because he was worried about you making a
you
living.
know, I was talking to my friend Janine Cummings recently. We were doing one of these in conversations and she brought up that essay. She wrote American Dirt and she read me the end of that essay out loud while we were talking. And it was in which I say it was the moment that I realized I didn't have to rely on my own petty sorrows and my own little life, that I could imagine other people's lives and make a story out of it. I could reinvent everything, which coming from Janine was incredibly moving to me.
Ann, I wanted to read some of your words to you tonight, and you absolutely told me I could not do it. So
Yeah,
we'll discuss that off air. We'll discuss that off air. Right. But it's an essay that it's so interesting to me that you decided so early on that it's what you wanted to do. I mean, you knew it, you stuck by it, and you weren't going to be talked out of it. And your father reading you that story honored that part of you, but also you were honoring that part of you. And it's also interesting, this is the other thing I want to talk about with your childhood in conjunction with you and Sister Nina, and that you didn't, you struggled to read, right?
Right. Very much so. Yeah.
And it's really interesting to me that then you can't identify a certain book, but I know for a fact that you read and loved Charlotte's Web when you were a child. And I haven't asked you this before, but it's something that's interesting to me is, did you just read it the once when you were a child? You did not reread it and reread it?
Oh no, I would get to the last page and just flip it over to the beginning.
Just like
over again.
Just like my friend Tracy Bailey, right?
Yeah, I read it in a circular fashion, and I never read Stuart Little. I didn't read Trumpeter Swan. I mean, I read them later, like as an adult later, but I loved Charlotte's Web. You know how every now and then you meet somebody with one kid and they say, I love this child so much, I didn't want to have a second child because I would never be able to love the other child. That's sort of how I felt about Charlotte's Web. Like I just didn't want to read anything else.
Did this desire to become a writer in any way connect with that book, or did it precede that book, or was it after that book? Can you identify that?
You know, my desire to become a writer really was before that book because it was before I could read. I have this theory that somewhere in my mind, I conflated the desire to be able to read and the desire to be able to write.
Okay, I've never gotten that.
I mean, physically write. You know, I want to be a writer, which means I would like to be able to print the alphabet on a piece of paper. And I said, I want to write, I want to be a writer. so much that it sort of became the thing that I wanted to do. But we lived on a farm when I was a kid. And I think that for me, I had an incredible association with Fern and with being the farm girl and kind of the girl out on her own. And I really wanted a pig. And my stepfather bought me a pig for my 9th birthday.
And that pig has just, I think, for the first time shown up in print in the New Yorker essay, right? About the 3 fathers. Have you written about that before?
You know, it's so funny, and I'm sure that this happens to you. So much of my nonfiction comes out of the talks that I give. And I get to a point where I think, I know I've talked about that pig so many times, and I have no idea if I've written about the pig
I don't think you have.
About the pig.
As a super fan, I have to say I don't think you have.
And whenever people ask me questions about, what book influenced you the most, and I always say it was Charlotte's Web, because that was the book that made me a vegetarian when I was a kid. And, I haven't eaten a pig since I got a pig for my 9th birthday, because it's like, if somebody gives you a puppy and then says we're having puppies
Don't
for
say
dinner.
it. Don't say it. Okay, Ann. Okay, that's enough of you as a child.
Do people know, those of you at home watching this, do you understand that hold on.
Wait, don't try to point at me, Ann. Or point at yourself. Ann, this is about you.
Do that.
Don't go down that. Don't go down that rabbit. You finally did it. You finally pointed at me. Okay. Wait. Okay, I'm not going to waste everybody's time by trying to point at you. Ann, keep it together. I want to take young Ann, who then learns how to read because of Sister Nina's intervention, I would like to say. She just had her 89th birthday.
Can I stop you right there and say, I just put a roof on Sister Nina's house.
And she just had her 89th birthday. Yeah.
What?
Okay. So now, Ann, you're deciding to go to college. It's like you want to be a writer. You want to be a writer. You go to Sarah Lawrence. I don't know. Did you make that decision based on wanting to write, or was that just your first choice?
This is such a good story.
Good. I don't know it. I don't know how you chose Sarah Lawrence.
I am so glad you asked this question.
Oh, good. Then I've succeeded as an interviewer. That's
wow.
Great.
You did. You knocked it out. So, I went to this little Southern Catholic girls' school, and the career counseling office was the size of a closet. And if you were the smartest girl in the class, you went to Vanderbilt. And there were, if you went north, you were going to Western Kentucky. If you went south, you were going to Auburn. And that was as far as anybody went. It was just college in a tri-state area. People didn't even go to Louisiana or Georgia. You went to Kentucky, Tennessee, or Alabama, and that was it. And I really, really wanted to go away. And I was a good student by the time I graduated from high school, but my test scores weren't great, and I had no extracurricular activities and whatever. So I had this idea that I knew absolutely that I wanted to be a writer, but I knew that writers, you can't make a living being a writer. So I was so practical. I decided that I was going to make my living as a graphic artist. And
I don't mean to laugh, but okay.
No, it's hysterical. It's fantastic. And to say that there was no one was watching this show except for me, right? I don't think my parents knew that I went to college. So I applied to New York State University at Alfred because they had a really strong arts program. And I was going to study visual art so I could make enough money to make a living as a writer. That was my career goal.
But were you getting any kind of input from?
Zero. Nobody knew what I was doing. Okay. So I flew up to New York State University at Alfred to do my interview. And while I was alone walking through the art building, and I started talking to this girl who was a student at Alfred. And she said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, what I really want to do is be a writer, but I'm going to make my living as an artist and then support myself as a writer." Right? Isn't this great? And this girl says to me, "Oh, no, then you should go to Sarah Lawrence. If you want to be a writer, then you should go to Sarah Lawrence." She said, "I really wanted to be a ceramicist, so I transferred from Sarah Lawrence to Alfred. You should go to Sarah Lawrence." And I said, "Oh, okay." And I went home and applied to Sarah Lawrence. And that's why I went to Sarah Lawrence.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm gobstopped by a lot of it.
A lot of it.
But I'm mostly gobstopped that you thought that you could support yourself as a writer by being an artist.
Well, and I thought I do practical commercial things like greeting cards. I thought that I would move to Kansas and I would get a job at Hallmark.
Can you hear me pounding my leg on the floor from laughing? That's
Doesn't this, I should have written an essay about this.
Yeah, that's an essay, yeah. That is an essay. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, you've almost put me off track, but not quite, because we're still at Sarah Lawrence, and what I want to concentrate on there are Alan Gorganis.
I'm only 17 at this point.
Yeah, Alan Gorganis.
We've got 40 years to cover, Floppy.
Well, no, these are the formative years.
Okay.
Alan Gorganis, Grace Paley.
Russell Banks.
Both of those people.
Yeah.
This literally, they formed you as writers. And I mean, and you've found actual, as you were cleaning out your house during the pandemic, you found the stories that you wrote for Alan.
Yeah.
And his, I mean, this could not have been, I mean, it's just so interesting to me because it's that thing where everything is so tenuous, Anne. If you hadn't come up with your crack brain theory about like supporting yourself by being an artist, so that you could be a writer, that person wouldn't have said Sarah Lawrence to you. And then you don't get Alan and Grace Paley, both who gave you incredibly different things. Can you just talk real briefly about those two very different gifts that they gave you?
Very, very briefly. And I put Russell Banks in there because if you write stories, everything has to happen in threes. Alan Gorganis, absolutely the most important teacher that I could have had, but frankly, that anybody could have had. And his thing was really just all about work. Tremendous work. We had to hand in a story every week. It was a year-long class. We had to do rewrites during the week. There was no time for preciousness. You just wrote something and you learned from it and you moved on, and you wrote something else and you learned from it. And the number of stories that I racked up that year, it was incredible, but I was so happy. From Grace could care less what we were writing. And people always say to me, "Can writing be taught?" And I say, "I can teach you how to write, but I can't teach you how to have something to say. I can teach you how to do a character and a plot and dialogue and set. I can teach you how to make a sentence. I can't teach you how to have a moral code, how to have an emotional center, how to have interest in other people and humanity." That's what Grace taught us. Like, Grace could have cared less about our stupid little stories, which she inevitably lost. I don't think she ever read. She certainly never put a pen to paper, but she was trying to make us moral human beings and to tell us that.
Can I just have a sidebar for a minute?
Yes, please.
Grace making you moral human beings makes me think of George Saunders' book that just came out. Yeah, and it's just like, if that's what you write from, right? Is that place, and
Right.
and you can write yourself to that place, or you can have somebody, or you can be that person and then write from there. But like, she could lead people there, and writing can also lead you there, which is kind of like what George makes that point very subtly in the book. Okay, sorry. Okay,
And the book
I know
is
it's your show, so.
No, wait, but A Swim in a Pond in the Rain, the new George Saunders book, in which he discusses 7 Russian short stories and will make you a better writer, a better reader, and a better human being. Make America Smart Again.
Yeah.
I love that book so much.
Right.
So that was Grace. I mean, her whole thing is the person you are as a sister, a wife, a mother, a friend, a neighbor, an activist, an American, and a writer. You can't compartmentalize any of those things. You are one person, and a rising tide lifts all boats. So if you work on yourself in any of those categories, you will become better in all of those categories. The third fairy who came to visit me at the christening was Russell Banks. And the thing that Russell did for me, we were having a conference very big at Sarah Lawrence, and he said to me, "You're the best writer in the class. Nobody is ever going to give you any criticism. If you want to be better, you are the person who's going to make you better." He said, "You're really good, but you're superficial. You kind of rely on the easy joke, and you're deft, and so no one's going to say that you're not doing a great job." And he said, "You have to ask yourself if you want to write literature or television." And
Wow, I didn't know that either. What a thing.
walked out of that room and I was a different person.
Yeah.
I mean, it was one of those things. I tell that story to people and they're like, "That is so harsh." Like, God, it was such a gift. And it was so right that the only person at a certain point, the only person who's ever going to make you better is you.
Yeah, and just think about those 3 different, I mean, you say the 3 fairies at your christening, and that's it exactly. There were 3 very different gifts. But they
Yeah.
also, Anne, not that we want to give you too many compliments, but they landed on fertile soil, it's just like somebody could have had all of those things, or somebody could have had what Russell said to you, and that could have been enough to knock them out,
Well, if it's enough to knock you out, then you deserve to be knocked out, I think. If something like that could take you down. But I do think that there is a moment in your life when you're open. It's like when people say, "What books influenced you?" And they aren't the books that I love. They're the books that I read at a certain point in my youth when I was open and capable of being influenced. I'm really not so capable of being influenced anymore. I wish I were. But when I was in college, but people could tell me things. People could, Alan Gerganis, who gave me those Russian short stories to read that shaped my life. If somebody had given them to me at 25 or 35, I would read them and love them and appreciate them, but I would not have been shaped by them.
Huh. I would like to argue with you a little bit, but that surprises you. But we don't have time for me to argue with you because I'm going on with my Ages of Anne. So then after Sarah Lawrence, which was truly formative, you go on to University of Iowa, which was formative in that you became friends with Lucy.
No, well, I mean, Lucy and I went to college together.
Right, but you didn't.
Yeah,
you
but
didn't, you weren't really truly friends. But that was so. Then you enter into the stage when you go to Iowa of like starting to do the work and starting to do the work with friends, because the other thing I think of is Elizabeth McCracken, and how when you were in Provincetown, you go up and knock on the door, right? You were lonely. Yeah. And again, you see that how everything is just connected by the thinnest of threads.
Yes.
Right? You went up and you and Lucy were both going to be writers. So you're going to go to University to the Iowa Writers Workshop, right? And so of course you're going to room together because you knew each other at Sarah Lawrence. And so it was like, yes, but it was just like this little bit of time. And then there's Elizabeth, I have her in my head as above you in the apartment above you.
Well, no, it was an apartment like across the parking lot and above me. Yes.
And both of those friends were so formative to you, and again, in very different ways,
Yeah.
as writers, you know.
And well, it's interesting because with Lucy, and Lucy and I weren't friends in college, but we had a mutual friend. And when we both got it, she was incredibly popular and I was not. And when we both got into
I
Iowa,
like you, Ann.
it was the summer before, don't interrupt. And she sent me a note and she said, I was really disappointed to find out that somebody else from Sarah Lawrence got into Iowa because I wanted to be the only one. And I don't have enough money to go out to Iowa to find an apartment. So if you're going out to find an apartment, will you find 2 apartments? Would you find me one as well? And I wrote her back and said yes, because I was going out to look for an apartment. And I went and it was so much more than either of us could afford. I could not find one, much less 2 single apartments that we could afford. So I wrote her back and I said, we're going to have to live together, because I think the place that I found was a 2-bedroom for $400, and $200 a month was all that we could afford, either one of us. So that was how that friendship started. And yet my friendship with Lucy was never about writing. We really didn't exchange work. We didn't talk that much about work. It was really, it was a friendship of love, and of life and connection. And in the same way, my friendship with Elizabeth was always a friendship about writing, and not about personal life or great exchange of information. It was always that we spent every moment talking about work. And they were and Lucy and Elizabeth were friends too. But they were a great balance for me.
I was going to say, but that's the yin yang of it, right? I mean, and it is just like where I found you as a reader was with the book that was dedicated to both of them, which was Magician's Assistant. And that was when I became, this will then take us to the next age of Anne. I did want to talk about how everything started, but we'll just go instead to, that was your 3rd book, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that I was at a ABA, it used to be called then, and it was in Chicago. It was the big conference, and I was at a cocktail party. And remember, I told you this relatively early on when we became friends. And I turned around at the cocktail party, and there you were, and it had your name. It said Ann Patchett, and I said, "Oh my God, Ann Patchett!" And you said, "But I wasn't Ann Patchett then," because I wouldn't have responded that way, because
Right.
Bel Canto was kind of like when you became
That's
Ann
what I became,
Patchett.
Ann Patchett, right.
But you were Ann Patchett to me.
Aww.
You were, and it was just like, and that was all I said to you, because it's like, surely I was not going to stand around and make small talk with Ann Patchett. But like, and then, so I want you to talk.
Can I stop you for just 1 second?
Yeah.
Because then fast forward to a Winter Institute, which is like ABA, but in the winter in Minneapolis. And there were 5 or 6 writers with a moderator and discussion. And we were sitting in a circle in front of an audience. And you sat down next to me and you were like, I can't sit next to Ann Patchett.
Right.
And I turned around and I was like, could you just give me a break?
You did. Yeah, that's what you did.
Just be a decent person to me for 1 minute. I got so mad at you.
Yeah, you were mad. And it's that thing, like, you know, that Nikki says about, why is everybody terrified of you? It's because you're terrifying. You're not terrifying. But I want you to talk. That's actually, I want you to talk about the bigness for a minute, if you can, about the capital A, capital P, the Ann Patchettness of it, and how it's like, I've talked to you about it as, you know, a friend said it's the 30-foot, you know, it's like there's a U and then there's a 30-foot U. And do you have to push, or a 500-foot U if you want? Do you have to walk around that larger self
No, because I have to make dinner and I have to do the laundry and I have to walk the dog and I have to look after my mom and I have to, you know, the world really conspires to keep my feet firmly planted on the ground. There is no room for me to have a big head. And I'll have to say, like right now, I am having such an Ann Patchett moment because, as you know, I'm working on this project to get books for kids for summer reading.
I wondered, when are you going to start talking more publicly about that? When is?
Well, okay, so my dream, is to turn it over to this other group of towering titans who will take it forward as their idea and their project, and I will step out of it. But just to bring everybody up to speed at home, I've been incredibly worried, as we all have, about the ever widening educational gap in this country. How can I get books to kids? We have a great organization in Nashville called Bookem, and they are wonderful. They receive and distribute books to children in underserved communities. So I call Bookem. I want to partner with you for summer reading books. Yes, they do summer reading books. They distribute 11,000 books and they have 6,000. And if I could get 5,000 as my contribution, that would be great. I said, terrific. I will buy 5,000 books and distribute them. Give them to you to distribute. And then I got off the phone. I was like, well, before I go and spend all that money buying 5,000 books, let me see if I can get publishers to donate the books to me. And in the last 10 days, I have gotten more than 80,000 books donated. And it is still coming in. And the people at Bookem they're so fantastic, but I think they're about to go off the roof. And that is
why it needs to be nationwide. And that was when you said to me yesterday, if there's anything you want, let me know, because everything's.
That's right. I'm hot. I'm at the craft store.
You're on the zone.
I am on fire.
80,000.
But that is the moment that I think, oh, wait, there is something to this Ann Patchett thing.
Right. And that is Ann Patchett it's like I said to you when you started this, and you started off with relatively big numbers, and I said, all you've done is tap the spider web. It's just like it's a web and you've just tapped it, because that is the beauty of you. And I did want to talk some about, the Ann Patchettness of you, but the Ann Patchett that's in conjunction with Parnassus, the bookstore,
Right.
And this is again, and this is the story of the happy marriage. It's a joke that sometimes I will just laugh to myself in the middle of the day about how no publicist, and can you say that line, like about how any book publicist who's trying to think how to get their author on the front page of the Times, that tell that
right, that you're my best bet for getting on the front page of the New York Times would be to kill Jonathan Franzen or Oprah, I think is what I said.
But instead, what was it?
I opened a 2,500 square foot independent bookstore. Yeah, if you put a bunch of publicists in a room together and you said, how can we get her on the front page of the New York Times? Well, what if she opened a tiny independent bookstore? That would
Was that Topfold? Was that Topfold?
No. Okay, just wreck it for me.
Well, no, I was genuinely wondering.
Oh yeah. If you were genuinely wondering, you might have asked if it was, on the bottom, and then No, it was on the bottom.
It was the front page of the New York Times, Ann. So
this day, Fluffy.
You said you weren't going to call me Fluffy.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Hey.
Okay, Ann, back to so let's take the big Ann Patchettness in the bookstore as part of it.
That's what I want to know.
What's that?
When are we talking about you?
This is not my show. This is me interviewing you about you. And let's go back to the books, Ann. So 80,000 books, and that's going to be more than Bookem can get out, right? So
well, no, Bookem distributes 130,000 books a year.
Okay.
So it's hysterical because I'm copied in on all of these emails about pallets and forklifts and loading docks and shipping fees. And, I just keep saying, I will pay the shipping fees. That will be my contribution in all of this. But they are working it out. And it's obviously now going to be for something a lot bigger than just summer reading.
And why is it, do you ever think about the kid you with your copy of Charlotte's Web and also with Sister Nina? Do you think about any of that when you're thinking about this? I mean, why do you, this is a really serious question. Why does it matter so much to get a book into somebody's hands?
Because I came from a family with money, by which I mean no poverty. I had a solid Catholic education. There were always books. Nobody ever said to me, you can't have a book, you can't afford a book. One of the things, as I've talked to you, that I'm always trying to figure out how to get kids who have never been in a bookstore into the bookstore and
Yeah.
let them pick out the book they want.
Yeah.
I have so many memories of being little. There was a little tiny bookstore called Mills that was down from the Kroger when I was growing up. And when my mother went to Kroger, I went to Mills. After school, my sister and I walked to Mills. There was one near the grocery store and one near school. And I'm talking like 7, 8 years old. And the woman, Stephanie Freudenthaler, who worked at Mills when I was a kid, would come to my events when I was writing Patron Saint and say, I remember you coming to the bookstore by yourself when you were 8 years old. It is that I have always had access to that joy. That is my comfort, my relief, the place I hide, the person I am, the thing that I want to proselytize about to strangers. Books, bookstores. I want everyone to be able to have that freedom and that means of escape and that power, and the idea that there are kids out there in my community who don't have access to that is the thing that makes me wake up in the middle of the night. I don't think about myself as a child when I think about that, because I had everything always. And the fact that Bookham has been delivering, they partner with food banks. So they put food on school buses and books with the food. And people can go to the school bus and get food and get books. And that's what books are. It's food.
Yeah, it's bread and roses, Ann. That's
So
what that is. Bread and roses. And I think in all of that, because I do think of the kid me, and I know this is more about Ann Patchett, but I think how I would feel. Part of what I loved was, and this is something that my mother excelled at, she paid attention to me as a reader, and she found me books that she knew that I was going to like. And so for me, it just got solidified in my mind that books were a way for me to see myself, and also a way that I was seen. It helped me understand who I was. And that's so much why I want, it's like I'm in on the whatever you're gonna like, wherever you go with your 7 million books. Let's get them out there, because there is a book that will help a kid understand who they are, see who they are, and it will help them make their way through the world. And if we can do something to put that book in that kid's hands, let's do it.
well, and let's also say that this conversation began because Jason Reynolds was doing this
Right.
in DC, in his hometown. He made a program where kids could go into independent bookstores and get free copies of his book.
Yeah.
And
So
when I
brilliant.
read that in the, booksellers newsletter, And I called you up and I was like, basically, how can we be as good as Jason Reynolds?
Right.
Which is the question I ask myself every single day of my life.
Right. No, and it makes me think, Anne, of I think I can do this off the top of my head. I always love acknowledgments in books, and Jason's book, Look Both Ways, the acknowledgement page, the end of it reads like this. So he thanks everybody in his family and also people in the corner where he grew up, and then he says, and then he thanks all the readers, and he says, I love you, I like you. Tell me, how are you going to change the world? And I can never say that without tearing up. And that's it. That's what Jason is. Yeah, you're right. It all started with Jason. Okay.
Okay, and you know what that is? That is a torch.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to be part of. That Jason lit a torch and I saw that light and I said, I want to do that. I want to follow your lead. I don't, like I've not been in touch with Jason Reynolds and I don't need to be. It's that he's inspired me. And he's inspired me to take on a big project. And you've inspired me to take on a big project. No, don't get fresh. You have. It's true. I mean, it's so much based in our relationship and our friendship and our twinned desire to do this thing. But the best part of the story is that if we do this, somebody we don't know is going to see it from afar and say, they did this. And so I can figure out a way to do this too.
And can we come back to Jason's acknowledgments? I know we're going to go to questions in a few minutes, but that I love you, I like you, tell me, how are you going to change the world? To me, that is what every good book does. It has that implicit message in it, which then takes me back around to why it matters so much to get books into kids' hands, because that's the message they need to hear, that they're loved and liked and that they can change the world. Yeah. Okay, I forgot about Ann Patchett for a minute. What I wanted to do was, let's see, I have 2 minutes. I don't think I'm going to be able to do it. What I wanted to do was, the last ages of Anne was, after being Ann Patchett, was These Precious Days, because you had the essay entitled that in Harper's about your friend Sookie, and that how all of this, now you're at this point where every moment is savored, right? And that the writing kind of helps you do that. It has almost become meditative, and it has made all of these days precious because you've slowed down. We talked so much about how we were on the road all the time, and now we're here. And so these precious days have become these precious days. And then I want to say that I know that you have never gone back and reread Charlotte's Web, and that, remember when I emailed you and I woke up in the middle of the night and remembered that phrase is in Charlotte's Web, These Precious Days, which is not where you took it from the essay, you took it from the song. And that passage of Charlotte's Web, which I have read out loud so many times in my life, all over the world, and I'm always reduced to tears. And I wanted to read it to you, but we only have a minute. Do you want to hear it?
I do. I read it all the time.
Okay.
But maybe
it acts as a blessing, I think, for all of us. It's toward the end. You will live secure and safe, Wilbur. Nothing can harm you now. These autumn days will shorten and grow cold. The leaves will shake loose from the trees and fall. Christmas will come and the snows of winter. You will live to enjoy the beauty of the frozen world. For you mean a great deal to Zuckerman, and he will not harm you ever. Winter will pass, the days will lengthen, the ice will melt in the pasture pond. The song sparrow will return and sing. The frogs will awake, The warm wind will blow again. All these sights and sounds and smells will be yours to enjoy, Wilbur. This lovely world, these precious days. Okay, thank you, Ann Patchett.
Thank you, Kate DiCamillo.
These precious days. And you yeah, okay.
Yep. Hello. Thank you so much. That was so touching. We do have questions coming in. Our first one is from Barbara, who asked if you could kind of expand on what you said about how the current books that you are reading no longer influence how you write.
Yeah, well, Kate was going to take me to task on this, so maybe we should both answer.
I was curious. It was interesting. So that's a good question.
Yeah, it is. It's just it's a very, very different experience. I read. It's kind of like if you're a wall and you have, say, wet stucco on you, and you put paint on, and that color is absorbed in the stucco and becomes part of the wall. That's one way of doing it. Or you put some latex on that you could actually peel off. You know, it's like the difference of the color being there on top of the wall as opposed to the color actually being absorbed by the wall. And neither is right, neither is wrong. But I think at this point in my life, I'm just no longer porous. I can enjoy, I can completely feel something and love something, but I'm not actually changed. I'm too solidified. I'm too old. Or that's Kate, what's your answer to that?
I think that maybe I'm more, I wouldn't say I'm more porous than you, but what I feel is that a voice in a book, you know, or the cadence of words. I will think, I want to plug into that. And I still feel that. And so it's like maybe my voice isn't as solidified. I don't know. But I can feel that. And I can feel also the uptick of, oh, I want to do that. And I feel the itch for words, and I get that itch for words from something that I'm reading that is singular and that has mysteries for me still. So I love your metaphor, though. I think that's a fabulous way to answer it. So maybe I'm stucco, but I've got cracks. I don't know. That was a great question.
So the next question is from Beth, who's a big fan and an avid reader. It's not a writer question. Do you have any examples of how an editor can be valuable to a talented writer like yourself? Can you talk a minute about the relationships with editors?
Yes, yes. And I have to say, oh, I did it. One of my very favorite editors is this one. No, seriously. There is nothing more thrilling. You can't even imagine how hard that is. There's nothing more thrilling than good editing. And Kate has been so valuable to me with endings. And I have written a book of essays this year, and she, I think, has been the first reader for every single one of these essays that I've written. And especially with the ends, the way that you have come back and said, oh, wait, no, there should be another beat, or you should think about it this way instead. I work so hard to take something as far as I can. I am not somebody who shows people my shoddy work. I do everything possible to make it perfect before I ask somebody else to put their intelligence to it. But then when you've gone as far as you can and somebody, either a friend or an editor, says, oh no, you know, you don't need this sentence, or you need to move this part along. And different people give such different gifts. I mean,
right, I was gonna say, you use lots of readers, Anne, and it's so.
And you're, well, you know, it's mostly you and Miley, and you are such a big picture thinker. And Miley is, I hate this word, granular, but you know, Miley really gets into the minutia of things. Miley Malloy, another writer that I love, and really marks every sentence up, and it's both of them such great gifts.
I always think of, this is not, but I shouldn't be answering because it's about you and editing, but it's so interesting to me because as a reader, before I was always baffled by what would an editor do. It was like I always used to think when I was a kid, what is everybody making such a big deal about directors for? The movie just happens and you film it, right? And so it's just like they're and it is that thing where you take it as far as you can, and then I always feel like when I'm turn it over to my editor, and you are a great editor and you're one of my first readers, but it's that I'm in the trenches and somebody comes along with a bird's eye view and they can see the pattern much more easily than I can because they're not down there in the trenches still. You're still so close to it, and you come in and you say, oh, clearly this goes here or this goes there. So okay, we're getting good questions, or
Yeah.
you are, and I'm just
Answering them.
piggybacking. That's right.
The next question's from Amy, who said, in the audiobook of The Dutch House, Tom Hanks narrates the story. How did it come to be that he was chosen to narrate your novel? Did he reach out to you after he read the book, or did you contact Tom?
I contacted Tom. Tom is a friend of mine. And if you go to the website for Harper's Magazine and you type my name in the search, you will get this unbelievably long essay called These Precious Days. And it is, in a small part, about Tom Hanks and that relationship and how he came to read my book and how that exchange launched me into a friendship with a friend of his that kind of changed everything. But it was a huge, huge honor that he did that. And if I had actually thought he would say yes, I doubt I would have ever had the nerve to ask. I'm a very brash asker, as I have proven in the last 10 days that I've racked up these 80,000 books. I've basically gone to every publisher and said, would you give me 1,000 books? Oh, thank you so much. Can I have some more? Hey, Tom, I just finished writing this book. Do you want to read it? It's crazy. I have this idea of you can't win if you don't play, and it never hurts to ask, and all of that. It's really done me very well in the course of my life.
Sure. Yes.
The next question is from Linda, and Linda asked, what helped you inhabit the mind of the brother in the Dutch house?
Oh, that was really a piece of cake because Danny is a guy who is lovely and smart and charming, and people just really, really like him. And he is utterly oblivious to the fact that there is this whole cadre of women surrounding him who serve him at every moment. He is just so wonderful and nice and easygoing. And it's like he's being carried on the shoulders of all of these women, and he doesn't know it. And if you've never met that guy, I can introduce you to him because I have known him my whole life in many, many guys. That's just the guy I've always known. So it was very easy for me to inhabit that character.
And the next question is a follow-up from Beth. Have you ever disagreed with an editor?
Oh, today. Today. Yes, as a matter of fact. It's so funny. So I have a piece coming out in the New Yorker. It's going to close on Monday, so it will be out the following Monday. And it's almost like doing newspaper work, whereas there are 3 or 4 days at the end of the week where you are doing nothing else, and you just get edit after, because you finish the edit with one person, with your editor, and then the copy editor comes in and the fact checker comes in and the proofers come in, and they all make changes, and somebody makes a change, and I say, okay, that's fine, you can change that, and then the third person comes in and says, no, I think it should be this, which is what I had originally. They are not in any way coordinated with one another. And at some point, I just find myself saying in the business, STET, S-T-E-T, which means get your hands off my sentence. We're not changing that. For example, there was a line in the essay in which I said, did I think I was Scott Fitzgerald? Did I think I was Jay Gatsby? And changed it, they said, no, no. Did I think that I was Scott Fitzgerald? They crossed out Jay Gatsby. Well, that has a very different meaning, because what I'm saying is, did I think I was the author, or did I think I was the fictional character? So I said, no, you have to leave them both in. And they said, okay, but you have to say F. Scott Fitzgerald. Like, okay, we'll give you Jay Gatsby back, but then in return, we want F. period. Oh, what the hell? Fine, great. F. Scott Fitzgerald. Does that make you happy? Okay.
The next question's from Angie, who asks, is it true you deleted your first draft of the Dutch house because you were unhappy with it?
Yes, that is true. That is true. And I love to tell that story. And then Elizabeth McCracken said to me, you know, that's called writing a second draft.
I know. That's like, I love it that she
I
said
know.
that.
She was like, oh, you are so proud of yourself for doing the thing that everybody else who writes books does all the time.
Right.
You threw out a draft of your novel, Cry Me a River. And when she put it that way, I was very chagrined.
Chagrined.
So yeah, I did. But as it turns out, it was no big deal.
So a question that we like to ask at the Story Center is, as you all know, COVID changed a lot of people's lives, and writers might be at home in an environment they're not used to being at, and the writing might be struggling for that. How has this environment changed your writing life, and do you have any tips for writers who are struggling?
You know what, Kate? I really want you to do that one first, and then I'll do it.
Oh, I think it's just for you, but I can make a very short answer. Because I traveled all the time, and I'm not traveling all the time, and because writing centers me and helps me understand who I am, I have written more, and I have been so grateful to be able to write during this time. And the thing about traveling all the time was, a lot of times I could feel the ideas like flowing at me, but now I like walk in the neighborhood, and I listen and I look, and the stories, I just keep on writing. And it has been a real gift to be able to do it during this time, because it has been a rabbit hole to go down, which is what I say to Ann. I'm going down the rabbit hole now. So, okay, Ann, you answer that question.
I really agree. It's been a beautiful continuum of time for me. Time has been, for the last 30 years, so sliced up. So I'm home for 4 days, I'm gone for 6 days, I'm home for 3 days, I'm gone for 1 day. I'm always packing, unpacking, anticipating, catching up, being tired, writing a talk, meeting people, getting over it, dreading it, looking forward to it. And this year, I have slept in my own bed every single night since March. I usually spend at least a third of my life in a Marriott somewhere. And it has brought me such a sense of peace and stability and centeredness to just be home and to be myself, and to not be performing, and to not be pleasing, and to not try to figure out who I'm supposed to be. And as far as writing and advice, this morning I was walking Sparky, and I ran into Josie, my neighbor, and her dog Georgie. And I haven't seen, we have sort of different walking schedules, so I don't actually run into Josie and Georgie as much as I would like. But she said, you gave me such important advice a year ago. And you told me she had quit her job and she wanted to do some work of her own at home. And I said, make yourself a schedule and pick out an amount of time. If it's 20 minutes, if it's 2 hours, whatever, that's your time, and stick with it and make that sacred for you. And she said to me, and she said, it just changed my life. She said, every morning from 9 to 11, that's mine. And I think that that really is the secret. I go back so often to Liz Gilbert's book, Big Magic, which is such a great book about creativity. And she said, figure out what your best time is. And she was saying for her, it's like from 5 in the morning till 6:30 in the morning. And for most people, she thinks it's 90 minutes, which is what Josie was saying to me this morning. Find your best time and let that be really sacred. Don't check your email in your best time. We all know when we're the smartest and the strongest. Don't let anything mess with that. And that's the advice that I would give.
That is great advice.
Yeah.
Wonderful advice. Last question, where can readers or anyone who's interested in following you follow you all so they can keep up with your latest news?
The best place to follow me is actually in the morning on Whitland Avenue in Nashville. What Sparky? Come on and follow along. I don't have any social media, but I have a bookstore, parnassusbooks.net. And especially on Tuesdays, I have become an Instagram star. So in fact, Kate, I didn't tell you this, but a local magazine named me the breakout Instagram star of the year.
It must have been the fur hat you wore during the storm.
Which is pretty great, considering I've never looked at Instagram. But I make videos every week, the Lay Down Diaries, make videos every week to talk about the new books that come out every week at the bookstore, and I highlight books and do videos for that. So that's all on the website, and there is some Instagram address which I would not know, but I'm sure it's...
You can find her by Googling Parnassus Instagram. I'm sure that'll work.
Hey, Kate.
Yeah.
Where do we go to follow you?
I have a Facebook page, and otherwise you can follow me in my books because there they are, and that's my best self there in those stories. Yeah, and I'm out in the neighborhood walking the dog, and so and hey, I want to say, Ann, thank you for talking with me, and Shannon, thank you for taking care of us for this whole thing, and thank you to all of you for listening. But thank you to all of you who believe in the power of books, and we're going to find a way for you to get involved with getting books to kids via Ann's efforts. So stay tuned. Yeah, look for her somewhere talking about that soon.
And thank you so much for doing this, for showing up, and for making it a really fun night. And I love you, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
We
and
like you. We love you. How are you going to change the world? Yeah. All right.
Thank you so much for both of you coming on. For those of you at home who are watching, please take a moment to fill out that Story Center evaluation form. It is in the comments below. It keeps us funded. It helps us bring wonderful authors to the Story Center so that you can learn about these wonderful opportunities. Thank you again so much. Have a great night.